everybody. This is Brady Henderson, the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church in Gaston, South Carolina, and you are listening to the Menorah podcast. Podcast that seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airways of the internet. We had a great time last week with Terry and Sandra Pound. So much fun that we have them back this week for the Menorah podcast, and we're super excited about that. Well, Terry and Sandra, thank you for joining me again this week. We talked about the history from last week. I just thought it went so well that we just are going to keep talking about it because there's so much information in this book. And at the present moment, we don't have a necessary timeline of when the books will be available, but as soon as we do, we're going to let you know. We're going to let you know how much they cost, order forms, all of that. I know we have people listening that are not members of our church. There will be ways for you to get a copy. We also plan on donating some copies to the local libraries and things of that nature because we want people to be able to use it. Well, I want to start today's history conversation with chapter 5. And so I'm convinced, Miss Sandra, that you have memorized this book almost. I just see it. I feel like you know it very well. And so I want to talk to you a little bit, both of you, about the pastors. Now, we kind of have to put a disclaimer because up until Reverend Corbett, really up until Reverend Menorah, for the majority of our church's life, they survived on what we would call circuit preachers. And so a lot of people might not be familiar with that. So either one of you, would you like to explain for the purpose of our audience what a circuit preacher was?
If anybody's familiar with the Methodist Church, they had circuit riders who went on horseback all over the state. And that was a time when there were no roads, highways. They went through by ferries and waterways through swamps, etc. Well, with our when we talk about circuit riders for our area, they were more civilized than that, I think, more sophisticated because they would have churches in this, mostly in this Lexington or Calhoun County area, that they shared, the churches shared a pastor.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see that they would have, the pastor would be at one church in the morning and then another church in the afternoon. So that's what a circuit pastor was. They went a circuit. They went. They weren't in one set place all the time.
There was an interesting story about one of the pastors that went to Harmony, and Sandra can probably expand on this one a little bit. He had a buggy that he would take from his house.
I read about this. I read about this. I was shocked.
He asked one of the churches to help pay for it, and they did.
Yeah. It was $40, wasn't it?
$40.
I read that and I went, that guy, he wanted to make sure they covered it.
Exactly.
It almost reminds you, I guess, of today if you run a car to pay for the car.
Travel expenses, yeah. Exactly.
Oh me, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I love the book for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them. You make it so relatable with these stories. I call them historical nuggets. You just find these things like that, for example, that everybody can relate to and just find interesting so that when I come to work every day, I pass by Harmony at what is now a roundabout, and this morning, just a few minutes ago, I thought about the buggy. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just those kind of things. So I really appreciate you doing that. And so we've got all kind of names of pastors here, and some of them, by the way, I want to give you more credit. You did a great job on finding as much. I know some we couldn't find information on, but you did a great job on finding information on these people. And the interesting thing that I kind of think of is so many of them are from all different parts of the state. They are not all Lexington County homegrown. For example, from 1893 to 1897, Reverend Hiram LaCroix Baggett lived in Campobello, Ward, and Saluda.
Yeah.
All over. So I guess when I think of this time period in the 1890s, for example, I just think of, okay, well, let's find a pastor local. Let's see if he'll come. But they traveled pretty well to not necessarily have the kinds of modes of transportation we do today.
Well, and those two pastors, one was married to the wife of the other sister. It was not explaining it right. But anyway, in the 20s and 30s, when I said those names look very familiar. And then I found that they were from Britain's Neck in that area. I know exactly where they're buried. I've been to that cemetery. So that was interesting too. That there were Low Country people, there were people from the upstate, all over.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, by that time, I know the railroads had been pretty well, but a lot of the modes of transportation in this part of South Carolina, all the way to the upstate, we relied heavily on Indian trails, old Indian trails, to be able. And let's see, I'll get the greats wrong, but your ancestor, who fought in the Civil War. Oh, his name is
James
escaping.
Hilliard.
Yeah, James Hilliard.
Pound.
He was able to walk back from Charleston all the way to Gaston. I'm assuming as you said, he probably traveled with a group, but I'm also assuming he probably used Indian trails.
More than likely. I did, when I worked at ETV, one of the jobs that I had was to do some illustrations for our history professor, Dr. Harvey Teal. And he gave me an assignment one time to draw a map of Indian trails and how they relate to the interstate. And it's amazing how close the interstate system in South Carolina is to the Indian trails. Well, the logic behind that is if you're going somewhere, you want to go the shortest, straightest distance you can. And so they related.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're looking at all of these different pastors. I think it's really interesting. A lot of them went to Furman. I think that's really strong. Kind of breaks your heart today that Furman, and of course,
Not the same.
for those, you guys lived through it, but, Furman started on a more liberal trajectory, and then, of course, we cut ties in the 1992, I believe. But anyway, a lot of them went there, so that is really interesting. I think it's important, too, that people understand. I'm looking at 1905 to 1907, Reverend James Furman McGill. I haven't been able to prove that he's related to my wife, but I have a strong feeling that there's a connection because there's not a lot of McGills. But I haven't been able to prove it, so if anybody has any information. So it says here, I'm going to read an excerpt from your book, that the previous pastor, Reverend Shelton Joseph Riddle, declined to serve the Sandy Run Church any longer, so the church extended a call to Reverend J.F. McGill. And he was from Darlington County. And so the thing that makes this interesting is that they didn't necessarily in this era always have a quote-unquote trial sermon. Okay, they didn't always necessarily have that. It was more or less, here's a name, let's see. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe our church had them by year contracts.
Yes,
I
and
don't want to use the word contract.
End of the year, like in November, they would decide who they were getting for next year.
Gotcha. And sometimes the pastor would decline, and sometimes he would accept.
And I think in that case of Pastor Riddle, I think he was sick. I think he was getting old and was facing illness. If I could be wrong, but I believe that's right.
It says here that he was 76.
Yeah, and because he died shortly, I think, after that.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. People in this time period didn't live as long for the most part. So we have tons of names here, tons of different people. I want to point one out that I believe, I can't prove it, I think your dad might have been named after this pastor. 1920, 1928, Reverend Hasford Baker Jones, and history repeats itself because interim pastor, a guy by the name of Bird later on, is your middle name. So that's interesting. But I want to mention Pastor Jones. He was also older when he served our church, but he was a pastor for 63 years, and from 1925 to 1928, he served on the Committee of Missions for the South Carolina Baptist Convention. So that's pretty cool that we do have people in our past that have been great leaders, so many of them. Also, this guy, Reverend Hasford Jones, pastored Red Bank Baptist. Of course, that's right down the road, Bethlehem Baptist and Pleasant Hill. He was a graduate of Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, and so you've got a lot of great information on him, and a lot of that information came from Miss Mayfield Seitler. And I remember when Hayward gave some information to you guys about that, and you've got the excerpt here, but I'd love to hear you explain a little bit of that.
Well, and he was, Hasford Baker Jones was married to an Altman. One of my first Sunday school teachers was an Altman. They lived right across the road from the church, Nebo Baptist Church. that's what struck my interest. And when I started researching him, he did a great work down in Georgetown.
Yes.
Just a mighty work down there. He's written about by several authors.
Andrews Baptist Church. Yep, down there.
Well, didn't Hayward give you a note that Miss
Gave me-
Mayfield had written or something?
and it's actually in there. I
Oh, okay.
included it because it was in her handwriting when she was very young, and I thought that it needed to be in there just as is.
I agree. I'll read it for our listeners. Sunday, February 17th, 1924. Mayfield D. Seitler. My father's name is Mr. Arch Seitler. My mother's name is Miss Ida Seitler. My birthday is in April, the 18th day. I was born, B-O-R-N-E-D, 1909. I joined the Baptist Church at Gaston, July 16th, 1922, at the age of 13. The pastor at that time was Reverend Hasford B. Jones. My Sunday school teacher at present is Miss Mincy R. Pound. Our present pastor is Hasford B. Jones. Mr. Coulter delivered service at Gaston Baptist Church Sunday night, January 17th, 1924.
I tell you, and to add to that, Miss Mayfield was one of the most faithful members of our church. She came as long as she could, and she was here every Sunday. She was such an inspiration to everybody.
Well, let me ask you this. I know technically at this time the name of the church was technically Sandy Run Baptist Church. She refers to it as Gaston Baptist Church. So did some of the people do that?
She probably meant that
Baptist
she
Church.
lived down the road a bit, that it was located in Gaston.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Gaston Church.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let me ask you this question, and I know that Lucy May remembered Reverend Corbett. She talked to you about it, talked to me about it. Another person that I know you interviewed, or I think you interviewed, Annie Laura Rawls. She remembered a lot of different things. Of course, we get into what we call the modern era. I would say that Edgar Davis was really one of the first of that modern era, though he was still technically a circuit as well. But we kind of talked about him last week and all the different things that he did. Another Furman grad. And then we had the Canadian, Dr. Menorah, who was here for 9 years and also served at Columbia Bible College, now Columbia International University. And so just a great pastor. And then so the church bought the house at that time, the parsonage, in 1954, but you added, Sandra, that they didn't actually live in the parsonage since he was the dean of men of church history, so the university allowed him to live there. So who was the first couple to actually live in the parsonage?
Reverend Talbot.
Reverend Talbot. Okay. Gotcha. Just an interesting question. Do you guys remember, or do you remember by chance, George Albert Bowdler Jr., who was an interim?
Yeah.
You do remember.
I remember him. More by the name than anything, but he was bald-headed. I can remember some things about him.
That's great. That's great. Well, there's all kind of different things in here. I want to ask you guys your perspective on this, whether it's, and you can have 3 or 4, but whether it's from William, the original William Pauling in the beginning, or the modern day one. What do you think are some of the most impactful times in our church as far as pastoral ministry? And some of these guys.
Well, I'll speak to that first. I think Reverend Talbot, when he came in, he was the first full-time pastor that we had living in the community, in the parsonage. And his family was a part of our church, obviously, but Reverend Talbot was a very evangelistic type pastor. As a matter of fact, I think, Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't there 76 baptisms the year of his ministry, during his ministry? So that lets you know that there was just an amazing spiritual movement in the town of Gaston, in our church in particular, when Reverend Talbot came. And I told the Sunday school class, I believe it was last Sunday or maybe Sunday before last, that he was the first person that I realized that a pastor, a reverend, was a common everyday person, because I would see him in Mr. Cully's store, not in a coat and tie, but in overalls, coveralls. And he would work in the yards, and he was a substitute school teacher. He taught me, and matter of fact, he showed us how his hand got bent, and it was because his teacher would bend it back and hit him in the palm of his hand with a ruler when he was
Wow.
misbehaving.
Wow.
And why we remember things like that, I don't know, but I do. I remember stuff like that.
You go to jail for that today.
Yeah, Scarlet Jumper, and
Yeah.
Helen and Betty Lucas and Helen King were part of that class.
Yeah.
They had him as a substitute teacher. So, you just remember things when you're growing up like that.
Well, isn't that so interesting? And it's harder today, but isn't that so interesting that he was able to teach as a substitute in the schools?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm blessed to be involved with the schools, not as a substitute, but in other ways. But it's taken me time to have to be able to do that. But back then, it just shows how different our world is, and how many more hoops there are to jump through at times. But Reverend Talbert was only here 19 months. He left and would later found Riverside Baptist, where I'm from, in Greer. That's a very well-known church, very strong church, and has been as long as I can remember. But 19 months, he was so impactful.
Yep.
I just think that's awesome. So many people remember him, even though he was only here 19 months.
Yeah.
Let me get my 2 cents in there.
Sure.
I would like to say that Amelia Seitler has offered different bits of memory to aid our memories on some of these things. But to get to your question of what you just said, the perspective, I think this is so important, as just like when Reverend Richard Capps and his wife Joyce came. We were the same age that they were. And I think this is so important that we related to him because we had children, they cared about our children, and we cared about their children, that there is so much that a pastor who is of the same age of most of their congregation. I see that happening now, that young families are coming and they're responding. And it's wonderful. It's beautiful to see that happening because they have such a good relationship with them. Not to say that older pastors, there's anything that's not good about that, because there is.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a boost in the church when this happens.
Well, and you're right, and to see history repeat itself. You see several times in these pastors, you see history repeat itself, and I agree with what you're saying. With Dr. Richard Capps, I think he was, I think he would have been mid-30s, right, when he came. And then after him was a really young guy, William Pauling, or Bill Pauling, who we all know. But, yeah, you mentioned that, and I think it's interesting today. I second that. I'm a little younger than some of our young families, but still in that same age neighborhood. And it's a lot of fun to be able to do life with them and see their kids, and then hopefully them, see our kids and things like that. And then you mentioned the older pastor thing. I think what's cool happening right now in our church is that I always think having an older pastor is important because you have stability, you have wisdom, you have I've been there, done that kind of things. And so now we have a really cool thing where I don't think I'm as young as I was. I'm 27 now. I was 21 when I came. And from the church picnic Sunday, I'm still feeling that a little bit from playing with all the kids. But to be able to have some youth, but also to be able to have somebody like Steve Kittrell, who's pastored in our area for a long time, is a really cool combination to where you can kind of have both, which is really neat. I want to kind of talk about a few of these guys because we got like Reverend Capps, he served 8 years. Reverend Pauling served 9 years. Monroe served 9 years. But then we have a lot of people like 2 to 3. We have a lot of 2 to 3 in here. So I just kind of want to go through these, and any memories you have, just kind of rapid fire. Some of our listeners are going to remember them. Amelia Seitler reminded me this past Sunday. I think it was their 67th, she and LH's 67th wedding anniversary when Reverend Alban married them. But we'll just kind of go through these. So after Talbert, there was an interim, but talk to me a little bit about Ernest Lloyd Till. What do you remember about him?
He was small person. When I'm thinking like that. But his wife was very active with the Vacation Bible Schools, and he was He was a calm, soft-spoken minister.
And some people, I wasn't here for a lot of these people, but I could tell by his writing. His writing was very good. He had a gift of writing.
Very humble.
Well, he served a lot of different churches, mostly in Orangeburg County. This is about as north as he got. He was a veteran of the World War, obviously World War II. He's also a fellow graduate of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, so I thought that was good. Okay, so we talked about Ernest Lloyd Till. Tell me what you know and what you remember about Reverend Alban. And I've heard some stories, but I'm gonna let y'all talk.
Reverend Alban, I was in the RAs at the time, and he, I think, might have started our baseball team, church baseball team. And we were practicing in a field that was where the Bayreuth gas station is right now. And it was real hot, and he was in his T-shirt. And I hope his family doesn't mind me telling this story, but he was perspiring profusely. The tattoo on his chest came through.
Really? He had a tattoo?
He had a tattoo, a ship tattoo. He was in the Navy.
Gotcha.
And he explained to us what that was all about. He said, I keep it covered up. He said, I would not do it again, but I did it, and it's there. So.
Well, that's interesting that back in that time period that I guess a pastor in the 60s having a tattoo, I wouldn't really think of that, but...
Well, we thought it was interesting.
I mean, Hannah scared me to death last night. She ended up joking. I didn't know she was joking, but she said, I think I'm going to get a tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we were watching Wheel of Fortune, and I said, what? And she kept going on with the joke until finally she said, I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
I said, yeah, no, I don't do tattoos. And it's not that I have anything against them for those that have them. I just don't want them.
Yeah.
That's just me. So, and speaking of that, we're in a period of talking about these pastors. I'm not sure if Reverend Talbert was or not, but of these guys all serving in World War II. I'm not sure if Talbert did, but we know Ernest Lloyd Till did, and so did Alban. And so, was there anything that differentiated them from other pastors that didn't serve in World War II? Was there a kind of common denominator, or no?
I wouldn't. I think it's just something they did because it was an obligation they had to the country.
Correct.
They had no choice in some situations.
A lot of them had no choice.
Exactly. So Reverend Alban is another one who wasn't here very long. He was only here 2 years. And so was he a good baseball coach, Terry?
Yeah.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
Good. Well, he lived a long time. He lived 91 years. Since he only recently passed away 10 years ago in 2016, did he ever come back and preach? Or
revivals,
yeah,
sure did.
So he did come back. Mm-hmm. All right, so talking about Reverend Alban, he wasn't here long. This guy was here a little bit longer, and I know a good bit about him. Let me back up on Alban. I was told a story by Kathy Stabler and then also some other ladies that in the old church building that they were up in the balcony one Sunday night, and they were doing what teenage girls do, which is giggle and talk and all that, and that he was in the middle of preaching and he called him down in the middle of the service. And Kathy, I hope I'm quoting her right, that he was a scary man to her.
Well, another incident that happened with my Sunday school teacher. He was sitting in the balcony with a bunch of us young boys who would like to talk and cut up. And we were talking, and the preacher started to pray, and somebody whispered. And out loud, Bryce Mack said, "Knock it off." and we did. It was just total silence. But, we had adults that were not afraid to call us down for misbehaving. I mean, parents didn't get mad at them either. They thanked them.
That's right.
They thanked them.
They thanked them. Yeah, and I think in a interesting way, I think we're starting to get back to that in our church. This past Sunday, I was walking to my car, and one of the little boys was running through the hall, and I instinctively just said, "Don't run in the church." Mm-hmm. And his mom said, "Thank you."
Yeah.
I didn't see him. My back was turned. Thank you. So I think we're starting to get to that a little bit. Now, this guy was a little bit older than some of these other guys. but Reverend Walter Brissy.
We love
And
him.
I am so glad that you mentioned this, marrying Walt. He married so many people. He married y'all, right? And a lot of others. And then also married you, Alan, and Sherelle was there for that. So full circle, my pastor, Larry Baldwin, at Hillcrest in Williamston, his childhood pastor was also Walter Brissy. And so when Reverend Brissy left our church, he went to Larry's church, which is Cedar Shoals in what they call Possum Kingdom. So that's really cool. So once he left Gaston, he was my pastor's childhood pastor. So baptized him, everything like that. So was born in 1904, so was older than some of the other guys that we mentioned. You wrote here, Sandra, and I quote, conducted the weddings of so many couples in our church in the 1960s. That is very true. Of course, I didn't know this, but the Brissys didn't have any children. So I did not know that. I thought it was cool that she liked to show photos of her cat walking on the piano keys. Maybe I could teach Beamer how to do that. I doubt it. But anyway, so y'all's thoughts on Walter Brissy?
He had a dry sense of humor. When I went up to him and said, Preacher Brissy, will you marry us? And he said, maybe I said, will you marry me?
Yeah.
And he said, I can't because I'm already married. That was typical of him.
Was he I can't tell by this picture, was he a big man, medium-sized man?
No, he was not a big man.
And his wife was bigger than he was. As a matter of fact, one Sunday he got in a passion about modern music, and he stood on the pulpit. I mean, he stood on the first pew. So he would.
Wow.
He was talking about a song that was on the radio, and he was really.
Oh no! Like
passionate.
secular music.
Yes.
Okay. Not.
He stood on the. I guess he thought, I want to make sure they hear this, so he just stepped up on that pew.
All I want is a party doll. That was the song.
That was the song.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that one up.
Oh, yeah. Roy Orbison, I think.
It's probably not near as bad as some of the stuff that comes out today.
No. But
Wow.
he didn't like it. He wanted to make it known that he didn't like it.
So he wasn't a Elvis fan, is what you're telling me?
No. Well, I think it was just whatever song.
Yeah.
The words to the song is what he was getting at.
Wow. Again, thank you guys for being so kind with your time, and thank you for listening at home.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you.
All right. You've been listening to the Menorah Podcast, a podcast that seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airways of the internet. We'll see you next week.